Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. As you should know by now, my name is Paul and I am your gracious host. Today, I've got the amazing Jacky Power with me, who's got an incredible range of skills. One of them is being a poet, amongst other things. Good morning, Jacky. How are you doing?
Morning, Paul. I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to see you.
Now, listen, I had to laugh because we were just talking before we came on air, and Jacky was saying that she'd lost a lot of her poetry. And when I said lost, she kind of defined that as in chucked away. So just tell us that again. So you were moving countries, and you're all this poetry that you've written since you were a young lass, and you've just decided on a whim to just check it out.
Yeah, there's a quote somewhere about, or I've read something around poetry, and actually that's you know that's the art of writing poetry. That it's not necessarily for somebody else. That if you can write it and then chuck it away, that's no bad thing. So I'm holding I'm holding to whoever's quote that was. But yeah, I moved to Ireland when I was about 23, and I had all of this sort of no, I was older than that. But anyway, I had all of this poetry that I'd written, and I just thought, gosh, I'd quite like this to be a new start. I think I'm just going to get rid of it. But rather than putting it in a nice little trunk somewhere up in an attic, I'm a bit more gung ho than that. I was like, that's it, gone. Yeah.
I know what you mean, though, because I've been into photography since I was about 13 or 14 and taken thousands of pictures in the day before digital. They're all on negatives. They used to come in packs. And because I traveled a lot and I had sort of various friends around Europe mainly, I'd be staying there for a while. I'd take a whole bunch of pictures and then they just kind of get left there because I'd be on the move and the pictures would kind of get delivered after I'd gone. And as you do over time, I've kind of lost touch with people. And I've got pairs of skis, rucksacks, boots, clothing, boxes of photographs. They've obviously probably been thrown away now, but
It's like a little crumb trail of your existence
yeah,
around the
look, yeah.
world.
But big, like you say, people probably had a clear out and moved out to go, bloody hell, Paul, I remember him, and he into the skip. Yeah. So I get it because it would be really cool if I could collate and collect all of those photographs of my journey, because I can physically remember several photographs that I've taken. I think, oh my God, it'd be great if I had that now, because it's just such a cool picture that I'd taken. I'm bound to say that because I took it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, but so the way that I think about that though is that I hope that like the poems that I've written or like the photos that you've taken, they get incorporated in what you're doing now. So there's, you do what I mean? Like it's layered. So it might be that there's something from the style of the way that you took that photo that now gets re-represented in the photo you take now. I think that's the best way to look at it.
Well, there's something really weird because just beside the right side of your head, there's a stream of sun rays coming in.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of a photograph I took in France. I was walking down this country lane really, really, really early in the morning. And it's like an old English country lane from the 30s and 40s, lots and lots of trees, lots of hedges, really kind of not overcast, but covered. Anyway, I'm walking along and there's this opening and I look to the right and there's this really, really ancient barn with the fronts fallen down over time and there's bits missing out of it. But inside, there are farm implements from, I don't know, 19th century, really long plow bits and cart wheels and all kinds of stuff. And the sun is streaming in through the broken bits of roof, just like by your side there. And I took a picture. I actually managed to get the one printed and had it with me at the time. And that is just really reminiscent, that the sun streaming in through your window there of that image. It just came straight to my head.
Well, yeah, I love the sunshine. I've heard it being called like God's fingers. The idea of the sun streaming through like that. I quite like that idea of, it gives you a different perspective.
You must have very skinny fingers. That's all I can say. So, look, how did you get into poetry? Because you mentioned just a second ago that you'd been writing it for a while. Did you wake up one morning when you were 6 months old and grab a pen and start writing?
Well, no, but I was always read poetry as a kid. I had, A.A. Milne was a favourite of mine. When we were young, I've still got that book now, and I love this poem. So I think I was sort of, absorbed it really. And they say that, don't they? If you want to be a good writer, then read a lot. So I think that was not that I was objectively doing that at the time, but I think that's what got me into that way of thinking, and the rhythm, and the different ways that words can be sort of put together. And then I just naturally just started writing. I think I read Anne Frank's diary, and I liked this idea of writing all of my inner workings into a diary and addressing something else, and that's how it started. And then what I found was I just wrote more poetically. So there'd be rhythm and assonance in the words that I was sort of putting together, and it sort of grew from there. And then when I was about 11, I had to do a piece of homework for religious studies. We had to do we were doing about drugs. It was that whole like just say no era.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did an anti-drugs rap, which I performed in front of my class, and then it sort of went on from there. So it's kind of funny how I ended up being an addiction psychologist. Something must have been planted at that early age.
It must have, because if you've written a sort of a just say no rap at the age of 11, that's kind of been in your subconscious for a while. And when you've gone through uni or whatever, it's going, ooh, what should I do? Oh, I can do that.
It must have been. And now it's amazing because I've got the opportunity of putting those two things together. So a lot of my poetry is around, well, I say rehumanizing one poem at a time, because that's what I've figured out. That's what I'm trying to do. Poetry, I think, is a great place for expressing the human experience. And obviously, in the world of addiction and mental health, there can be a lot of stigma. And I'm really up for reducing that stigma. And I think poetry is a great way of doing that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of artists, both of the written word and sculpture and painting, did struggle with mental challenges. I mean, obviously Van Gogh is probably the most well-known struggler, but he's not the only one.
Well, no, and I think there's a deep noticing in people like that. I think that the way that they feel is they feel much more deeply, and that can be really painful in a human experience. And whilst it can be very painful, it can also produce this amazing art in different forms as a way of expressing the depth of that feeling. I think that's the bottom of it, really.
Yeah, like you say, the art is a result of them wanting to express how they feel, because nobody around them understands or is going through the same stuff they're going through inside.
Yeah, and that's why I started writing poetry. That's exactly it. It was like this, lovely blank page where there was no one that was going to tell me that I shouldn't feel that way, or that I was being too sensitive, or whatever the messages were that I had received at that time. I could rebel within my poetry and say, actually, this is what it's like. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to do that for other people. So I've got a poem called Homeless Bum, which is about homelessness, which I wrote after being in Austin and seeing this memorial to people that had died on the streets. And I'm just thinking about how we walk past homeless people and things, and actually everyone has a story to tell. And as an addictions psychologist, one of the things that I often do when I start seeing someone is we talk through their timeline. So we talk through their own story, right? And I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if you could do that for people on the streets, because it would rehumanize them rather than them being seen as this, whatever the stigma is, to be seen in all of their humanity. So I wrote a poem for it, and that one actually got picked up by a homeless charity for them to use at the beginning of a conference that was about reframing the way that we look at homelessness. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've met a couple of, I was homeless myself for a very short period, a long time ago, but since I've been living down in Folkestone, I've met a couple of guys, both ironically called Paul as well. And both of them had become homeless, one through mental challenges, and the other guy, because basically he split up with his girlfriend and kind of lost everything, lost his way a bit. And the next morning he woke up on the street, and there he was for the next, was it 3, 4, 5 years? And
Yeah.
I've not seen him in a long while now, so I think he's actually found some housing and got himself back into work, which is really, really good news.
Yeah, and I think a lot of ex-service people, it can happen there as well. And it's, there's always good reason, and I think that's what I was trying to share. Do you want me to share that poem?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, it's called Homeless Bum. Go on, you're right, walk on. I'm just a homeless bum who doesn't deserve your glance or cash. No, run on by, off you dash. I'm just a homeless bum. I'm not a survivor whose nights were scarred, whose innocence was bruised and marred, who, by anyone's book, has had it hard. Go on, you're right, walk on. I'm just a homeless bum. I'm not a survivor whose flashbacks are near, who drowns them out with spice or cheap beer and lives in walls built from fear. Go on, you're right, walk on. I'm just a homeless bum. I slur my words you can't make out, my muffled screams, my voiceless shouts, my untold story, so smelly, disgusting, bloody, and gory, like me. Go on, you're right, walk on. I'm just a homeless bum.
Wow, that's great. That really kind of evokes what it is to be a homeless person and how non-homeless people see them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're an actor as well, aren't you? Because you didn't just read that out; you kind of emoted it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, it comes back to that humanity thing, right? Is like um, when I'm when I'm reading it, connecting with the feelings of what it feels like to have this history, and for that not to be told, for that instead to be judged on an appearance. And yeah, so if I can use the way that I present it or the way that I share it to help evoke emotions in others as well, then I think that's a good thing.
Well, yeah, I guess that's the whole point, isn't it? Really, of poetry is to tell a story, but also to evoke emotions. Like before we went live, I was talking about one of my favourite poets, John Masefield, and he's written several poems about the sea or going to sea or missing being at sea. And yeah, it really kind of stirs something in me when I think about that. But my favourite poem is called The Seekers. And that, well, it's not from a book, but there was a book that I used when I was a kid, when I was traveling around Europe. And it's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to Europe. And it's one of these budget guides, where to find cheap food, where to sleep tonight, all that kind of stuff. But right at the start of the book, there was an extract from the poem, which is, I can't remember it exactly, but it's about sort of being looking for a city that you're never going to find, which is kind of like never been able to settle. You just want to travel. And then the one phrase I always remember is the watch flies under the stars and the road again. So, you sleep rough, but you're sleeping under the stars. It's great. And then in the morning you get up and off you go. And it really, really evokes the feeling of, what hitchhiking was like when I was doing it, because it really kicked it home. And that really is one of the few poems that's kind of stuck with me and actually meant something with me. So, I mean, I've read thousands of poems. I mean, we were talking about that book that came out 10, 15, 20 years ago, the nation's favorite poems, where they asked, I think it was the BBC or someone asked people to vote on their favorite poems. They came up with like a list of the Hot 100, and most of them I recognized from school and from books and things, but there were quite a few that I didn't, but the bulk of them I'd recognize. So we know poetry, but we don't necessarily kind of sit down and read books of poetry like we say we read a novel.
No, absolutely. And I'm the same. Like I've started writing this, and then I mean, I studied English at uni, so I had to write stuff there, but I've really struggled with poetry because it just felt so difficult. And yet there's such a wide range, and I think it's nice if it creeps up on you. And like you said, you saw this excerpt in a different book, and that led you into thinking something, and then you realize it really captured that sense of the kind of the noticing, like in the fire under the stars, and then the repetitive nature of moving on again, and that in a few words was encapsulated for you. And I think that's I guess it's being open to that, isn't it? And I do think, unfortunately, I mean, I know there's some great teachers out there, but I when I got to uni, I struggled with poetry because I was like, God, I should know this stuff. I should know what this means. I should know. And you know, we don't have to know. I think it comes back to the feeling, like you said with that poem. It's how it makes you feel. That's the main thing.
It is. It's about emotion, and probably poetry evokes more emotions than literature, as in, you know, sort of fiction. Some really, really good books will have passages that kind of get you going, but most people read books for stories and entertainment, don't they? Not to get a great sense of emotion, whereas poetry does do that.
Yeah, I like what Patrick Atuma says. He's a poet and can never say that word, theologian, and he was saying, you know, trauma tells us that you're alone, and poetry kind of goes, yes, yes, you are. And I quite like that. It's sort of the reassurance of, yes, what you're experiencing is actually the truth. And yeah, I don't think you quite get that in novels in the same way, that there's that sense of being separate, that sense of not fitting in or being alone is expressed in poetry. And through that expression, we can feel like we belong. Does that make sense? Like the very, you know, it can be this disparate thing and it gets put into a poem, and I can feel like so on my own in that. And then I see someone else has written about something and it's like, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah, I get what you mean. The sad thing is that we don't actually read poetry that much. I mean, I know slam poetry, particularly in the States, is kind of pushing its way into the not the modern world, that's the wrong phrase, but into entertainment, shall we say, so people get to hear about it more. But it's almost like a subculture, isn't it? It hasn't taken a major platform as yet.
Well,
although,
yeah, I mean,
sorry to interrupt, I was just thinking, the president's inauguration, that was a slight, it wasn't her poem, I don't think, but it was a
she wrote it.
Oh, I've read somewhere that she was, anyway, but that was that was poetry. It wasn't a speech as such. It was a poem that she'd written and she read out in the inauguration, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, but I think it's like you say, it is a bit underground, but it's definitely coming much more to the fore. I mean, I'm seeing it much more in therapeutic circles. People talk about experiential therapy, and they're seeing poetry as a way of as a different kind of modality that can be used. So I think it's kind of, I don't know, I think it's quite an exciting time, really. And certainly in the spoken word world, there's a lot more going on. There's more sort of nights and evenings which are cropping up all over the country. Life and Rhymes was on Sky Arts in October. That was hosted by Benjamin Zephaniah. So that was spoken word. That was different people coming up and doing spoken word. So yeah, I think it's gaining momentum.
Cool. In therapy, there's lots of different sort of art that's coming into helping people. And there's photography as therapy. I've met someone recently who is an art therapist, brings people in and gives them oils and brushes and stuff and gets them in front of canvases as a way of kind of releasing emotion and feelings and stuff that other people just can't recognize or understand.
Yeah. And I think there's bibliotherapists, which are therapists who, you know, they are using poetry in this, I don't know, you might be discussing something and they'll say, oh, I've got this poem, that I can introduce you to that might help you relate. So there are definitely different ways of, and I think it's about noticing, isn't it? It's about validating the experience. And that's what I think therapy is. It's about mirroring that, and it's about truly seeing someone in their entirety, really. And I think art can do that really well.
Oh, it can do, definitely. Now, coming back a second, one of the reasons why we got talking was about you kind of overcome a few things, and one of them was it about a show that you'd gone to and kind of really flopped, and then you went out and did something amazing afterwards?
So I was part of a writing group, and I'd written these 5 tales called Fake News Fairy Tales, which it was basically like take like the story of Cinderella, and it was telling the story of the cobbler who made the shoe, the Cinderella shoe, or it was telling the story of the mattress seller in Princess and the Pea, you know, Mattress Mick. And I created this whole story around them, and I thought they were really funny. I mean, they are funny, but I was totally under researched as to what to do with them. So, but I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go to a literary festival and I'll present them to some agents, and I'll just get an agent, and then we'll, you know, they'll think I'm brilliant, and we'll publish them. And so it was like not not researched at all, other than look at my 5 tales, aren't they cool? So I went along to this literary festival, and slowly, one by one, the day went on, and the agents were like, you know, do you know anything about, because I'd gone to children's literary agents, and they were like, do you know anything about children's literature? Do you, like, what age bracket is this for? What? And it just became really apparent just how under researched I was, and so I, you know, kind of had to sort of lick my wounds on the train back, and feel very humiliated and embarrassed, and so then I wrote a poem about it, and then through writing that, which is called Bitterness, which I can share if you'd like, and I wrote it like tongue in cheek, you know, it's taking the piss out of me really, but also that frustration, you know, when you're trying something new and everyone else seems to be able to manage it, but you aren't. Well, that's how I felt anyway. And it was like, you know, where's the secret? What's the secret key to this? But through writing that poem, it made me sort of it made me take stock and go, you know, it's a very judgmental poem. It's a very self-piteous poem. But through writing that, I could take a step back and kind of go, okay, well, how else can I reframe this? Well, actually, you know, rather than being judgmental towards them, maybe there's some gratitude in the fact that they're pointing out my inadequacies, and I can either choose to improve upon those, or maybe that's not the route for me. And as I did that and sort of pulled it to pieces, I realized I don't want to write children's literature. That is not, you know, I enjoy reading it to my kids, but that's not what I want to write. Like, I've got, you know, tons of poems. That's what I do. So I thought, well, I'm going to do a show. I'm going to do called Light and Life Shadows, which is basically about when you're in the messiness of stuff, you know, you always hear about people's successes. Like, oh, it was hard, and then I got through it, and here I am now. And I thought, what about having a show where we talk about just how messy it is to be human? So I did I wrote this show and produced it and performed it, where it's 30 of my poems sort of weaving through like how tricky it is to, you know, to be human, and how we're all in that together. Yeah, and it sold out, and it was great fun. So and it sort of then snowballed into me thinking, actually, I really like doing the poetry stuff. How can I bring that more into my work? How can I share that more? And here we are.
Did you repeat the show? Did you kind of do a tour with it, or was it like just a one-off?
It was a one-off. It was in the October 2019, and then I got a frozen. So that was my plan, was to kind of, well, maybe I'll, you know, apply to Edinburgh and do it there and stuff. And then I got a frozen shoulder, and then lockdown happened, so it's kind of parked at the moment. And now I've got COVID poems that I've written as well, so I'd probably want to include those now.
So is the intention that, you know, once lockdown is ended and we're getting back to a relative normality, that you will get out there and redo the show, you say at Edinburgh or somewhere else?
I don't know, because times moved on. And I think, you know, I've really struggled with the balance, right? I've got 3 children. I work. I'm developing more around the work that I do in poetry and therapy and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think I need to get some sort of steam behind me before that's back on the agenda. But that's where I am right now with that. I think because, you know, I have to kind of balance everything out, and that's really what having the frozen shoulder taught me, is you can't do everything all of the time, or you know, yeah.
Do you use poetry in your own work as an addiction psychologist?
Well, this has been an exploratory process, because what first happened was I'd write something, and I'd have a client, and I'd think, oh, I've got a good poem to share with them about that, but obviously that's my agenda, not theirs. So I had to think about how I could, how I could bring it in, and that's why I do workshops now. So I still see one-to-one clients. I don't bring it in with them in that sense. We might do some writing exercises, but I do it in groups instead. So I've got a few different workshops. The most recent one that I've done was a 6-week one, and it was taking a feeling each week. So we did a week on grief, a week on joy, loneliness, hope, and that, everyone really loved that, because it's like a therapeutic space to explore that emotion, which I'm really passionate about, because obviously, addiction is about medicating emotions. So the opposite of that needs to be about exploring them and being curious and being okay and regulating. And obviously, it's not a workshop for addicts as such. But it is a workshop about exploring feelings and being all right with that. Normalizing that.
Was it a writing workshop, or was it a workshop for people with addiction challenges who happened to be writing as part of the process?
It was kind of neither. It was a writing for healing and feeling workshop. That was what I called it. So it's holding a therapeutic space. So knowing that it's going to be contained, that it's going to be safe, that it is about actually feeling feelings, but it's using writing to help the process. So I would start with some sort of free writing. Then there was psychoeducation in there around the feelings. I'd bring in sort of different, psychological models, and then there was some poetry, and some of that was my own and other people's. And then there were different writing exercises. And what was lovely is as the weeks went on, the first week everyone was like, "Oh, thank God, I don't have to share anything that I've written." Great. But by the 6th week, people were like, "Oh, yeah, have you got time for mine?" And just seeing that process was really lovely. And they've kept together as a group. I'm going to write something else for them, because they want to sort of carry on, into another workshop. So yeah, and community. It's about creating community as well, I think, but in a very small.
Community and writing, and I can never say this word, are very cathartic.
Yeah.
In the sense that they do help people. Well, we've already discussed it several times, but they help people release stuff, or at least become aware that they are feeling sad, happy, angry, frustrated about a specific thing, and they can actually express it. Because so often, especially with guys, the stigma is about, you don't express your emotions unless it's Saturday night, you want to get angry down the pub and beat somebody up, but apart from that, you don't express.
Yeah, and I think, I did think about doing a guys one, and I wasn't sure about me being the only woman in it, how helpful that would be, but because I did think it would be a great workshop for just 4 guys again to, I actually don't get it. I think I miss that chip in my brain, which is like, oh, emotions aren't, there's bad emotions, because I don't get how we're all right with laughing through joy, and yet people apologize for crying, and yet tears can help release oxytocin and endorphins. Like that, like it is the human body is amazing. It's a healing tool to cry. And yeah, and part of the workshop stuff is, as feelings come up, then part of the psychoeducation is, well, how do we regulate that emotion? If you've got that, how can you then handle that? But what was interesting, Paul, out of all of the weeks that I did, people loved fear. They loved the fear week. They loved loneliness. They loved joy. And they found hope really hard.
I understand that. I mean, my clients, if they cry during sessions, they apologize. And I'm saying, why are you apologizing? It's perfectly normal. You're letting stuff go. But hope, especially now and around the past year or so, a lot of people haven't seen any sign of hope, in the sense of, well, I've lost my job, I've lost this, I've lost that. I've got no idea when things are going to go back to normal. And I think, the media, the stuff that you see on the internet kind of crushes hope, because
Oh yeah.
it just feeds into this negative vibe that everything is bad, the world is going to end, the earth is going to collapse on itself, and all the other stuff. So if you're feeding off this negative vibe, then hope just gets crushed and
Yeah.
squashed and mangled, and people don't know what the word hope means in the end.
No, and it is a cognitive process as well. It is something that you have to actually engineer. And can I share? I wrote a poem about hope during lockdown. So will I share that?
Go for it. Go for it.
I looked for hope in the cupboard. I looked for it under the stairs. I searched for hope in the cookie jar. I sought it in strangers' stares. I asked about hope at lost property. I checked my inbox in case. I poked about under the sofa. I even went through the waste. But it was masterly sequestered. Its camouflage had me tricked. I was on the edge of despairing when something inside me clicked. I glimpsed it in the squirrel, who simply cared not a jot about whether my Christmas I'd wanted would go ahead or not. I caught a peek through the spider's web, such beauty from something I'd shun. I glanced at the hint of suggestion that came from the winter's sun. I peeked at it in the planets that made me feel so small, and this lit something inside of me. For none of it matters at all, for we are alive, and that's magic, a once-in-a-lifetime chance. And I caught hope by the hand again, and I asked it once more to dance.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Because that's exactly what is going on for a lot of people, except the good bit at the end. They're looking for hope. They're trying to figure out what hope is again. And I believe that gradually, now that lockdown in the UK particularly is kind of coming to a close, that people are starting to find hope again. A bit like spring. Everything's horrible and manky and grey in winter, and then suddenly you see the shoots coming up in the spring.
But I think that's it. It's like I said, it has to be engineered, and it is possible to find hope daily, but it's about looking for it. It's about noticing those tiny, tiny moments that remind you that actually being alive is such a fantastic experience. To have all of the senses, to see the views that we can see, to smell the smells that we can smell, all of that sort of stuff is actually quite an amazing experience, and sort of to shift the mindset. And yes, because there's always going to be stuff to despair about. I remember thinking that quite early on as a kid, when there was all the Cold War stuff and nuclear, and then it's gone to climate change, and it's like there's always, there'll be a meteor, like there's always something. Because I think in our subconscious we know that life ends, and we're all a bit freaked out about that. So you got to put it out there as, there's this disaster to worry about and things, and I don't want to waste my life doing that. I want to make the most of the moments.
Yeah, I mean, if a meteor does come, there's nothing we can do about it, pretty much. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
But the chances are extreme. In fact, the chances of a meteor hitting us are less than the chance of you being born, because I mean, the actual Jacky and Paul being born, 17 trillion to 1, I read somewhere once, of that actually, of you as who you are today. If you think about, the mixture of eggs and the sperm, and how many sperms come wriggling through, there's billions of things, So for everything to line up properly and to work, and for you to pop out at the end 9 months later, somebody calculated about 17 trillion to 1. That's how lucky we are to be alive.
Yeah? Yes, exactly. And I don't want to get too existential about it, but when you think about, look, our lives are going to be over, and then eventually the sun will implode and the earth won't be like what extent do you want to take it? So just bring it back to, thank God I can, smell gorgeous smells. Like, just keep it in that.
I talk about mindfulness a lot. Just keep it in the moment. What happens in 10 minutes or 10 hours or 10 days or 10 years, you can't reverse, because it hasn't happened yet, and it will never happen, because when you get to 10 minutes from now, that is now. When you get to 10 years from now, that is now.
Yes. So, time is this weird concept. Yeah. So bring it. So exactly, having it in this moment and finding the joy in this moment. And I don't mean in a toxic positivity kind of a way. I'm not up for that. There's a full, we have to experience the full gamut of being human. But but also to remember we have a choice about whether to despair or whether to look for joy. Like,
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, I completely agree. There are times when being joyful and being happy are completely inappropriate. If somebody's just died, or you've lost your job, or you've just come out of a car crash, then, oh, whoopee doo, yeah, I'm so happy I've had a car crash. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So you're going to feel a variety of emotions, but most of the time we're not in those experiences. So yeah, we can choose to feel happier. We can choose to look for hope. We can choose to look for joy. And as you said, it's a cognitive process. We have to go looking for, not have to, we choose or choose not to go looking for it. But it just makes life, we talked about the universe opening and closing and Big Bang and all that. We are here for an infinitesimally small amount of time. We're not even, a fly lives for 24 hours. In the grand scheme of things, the life of the universe, we're not even like 3 seconds our lives. Not even 3 seconds or 5 seconds. Where it's a tiny, tiny little speck. So you may as well enjoy it. You may as well do what you can to have fun with it. Now, again, there are times when you can't enjoy it. I get that. Yeah. So I'm not one of these people that got to be, happy, jolly, sticks all the time. But the majority of the time, we can be happy. We can enjoy what's going around us.
Yeah, the way that I describe it is like emotions. If you think like, I don't know, protein. Like if you think about protein and macronutrients, right? So like, some emotions are like the building blocks. They're like the carbohydrates. So anger, for example, that's like the energy to create boundaries, and then love is the building block for connection, right? So you've got all of these different emotions. And then the gratitude, the looking for the goodness and stuff, is a bit like the fiber. It helps everything to tick along through the system, but you can't survive on fiber alone. You need all of those other different emotions,
But you can't survive without fiber. That's the important thing.
No, exactly.
Your body will just blow up, essentially, if you don't get any fiber.
Yeah, but it's not, it's not an either or, it's an and.
Yeah, it's an and. Yeah, you got to have some, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not all of it. You don't eat 50 tons of fiber a day, but you've got to have your 30 grams or whatever it is, the equivalent. Yeah, I get that completely. It's a really interesting way of looking at it as well.
Yeah.
So you were saying earlier that you see clients one-to-one. Do you kind of do group? You have the workshops, which we talked about. Do you have group therapy as well?
No, I love group therapy, and I've done that in the past, but no, not at the moment. With lockdown and everything,
Sure.
and I've been working privately. My plan is that the workshops really are going to be where I would work with people in groups. Yeah.
So what's coming up for you? What are your plans once lockdown has kind of ended and fizzled out, when we get back to being allowed out and doing things and seeing people again?
A few things. To do more workshops. I'm also writing a book, so I'm putting all of the poems into a book called Our Human Tricky Things. But the idea of the book, which is like, God, it's like trying to pull teeth. But the idea of the book is taking each poem and then putting like a bit of a psychological explanation, a bit of an essay, I guess, around it, to educate and to reassure and to help people to feel less lonely. That's the idea of the book. And then I'm also starting up my own podcast called The Therapeutic Poet, which is again using the poems to open up sort of different conversations. So I've got a poem about dyslexia, for example. I've got a trustee from the British Dyslexia Association coming to talk about that. I've got one on empathy. So I've got someone from who runs a sort of an emotional wellness center in the States to talk about that. So it's kind of, looking at the different aspects of being human and starting with a poem as a sort of to springboard us into that conversation. So I'm recording those in the next few weeks.
So have you got is it going to be a finite series, or will you continue to kind of create poetry that you can do a podcast around?
I think it's going to have to be finite at the moment because there's a finite number of poems, and it's like I can just imagine the well running dry. But I've got like over sort of 150, so that should keep me going, for a while. But the idea is it'll be like a slot of 8, do that, and then have a break, and then another slot. Yeah.
That's been an interesting process, because podcasts tend to kind of run on, don't they? And you're going to
Yeah.
do like, well, I've got season one's going to be 8, and then I'll put together season 2, which will be 8 or 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an interesting concept. And also, when you look through your poems, it's going to be interesting the kind of people you're going to want to connect with, depending on, like, for example, the poem you just read on homelessness. Would you find a homeless person to come on a podcast with you, or somebody from a homelessness charity?
Well, yeah. So I have two people in mind for that one. One is someone I know who's a therapist now who was homeless. So I haven't asked them yet, but so I might ask them, or there's another group of people that I could ask. Yes, and they sort of run a homeless charity and things, which is linked to, you know, the group that I performed the poem for
Mm-hmm.
when they opened up their conference. So yeah, I
I just
don't know
want to
yet.
So I come back on something you were talking about, the workshops. We discussed very briefly about workshops for men. I think it's a brilliant idea, because men generally, as you know, we don't, or have a very great difficulty in expressing our emotions most of the time. So if you can get a bunch of guys together in a workshop, we say over a series of 6 or 7 weeks, to talk about different sets of emotions, and then building that community as well, I think that's a brilliant idea. I really do.
Yeah.
But if I
Yeah, I
was,
think
if
really, you know, I think it's really important. I've got three sons, and I was talking to them my eldest one last night about sexual harassment, actually, and we were, you know, with everything that's in the news, and he was like, "Mum, I don't like know what I can say anymore. I don't know how to handle this stuff." And I think that's, you know, I don't think he's alone in that, and I think that there's not a forum actually for guys to vulnerably be able to share about everything that's going on, and we can't, you know, we can't tackle the issues that we have in society unless there is the space for that as well. It's not about bloke bashing at all, is it? You know, and it is, but we need those forums where people can, and guys can explore their vulnerabilities, and for that to be, you know, absorbed, acknowledged, and a starting point for change. So yeah,
yeah, so I mean, if I was more of a writer, I would definitely have something like that set up, because I think it's really important. You know, there's a very slow movement that's starting to grow, but again, it's like springtime, tiny little roots, where people are creating spaces for men to discuss emotions, and particularly mental health and what they're going through and what they've been through. But it's not enough, and we need more of that, and it needs
yeah,
to expand, you know, because the suicide rate amongst men is ridiculously huge.
yeah,
It's horrendous. 12 guys, just in the UK alone, 12 guys every single day
yeah.
take their own lives. It's a horrendous number, and it's probably got more
It's
as
the
well.
worst, isn't it? Amongst, like, suicide's the worst amongst young guys. Is it between
Yeah,
18 and
yeah,
55?
yeah. I mean, I put a post on my wall yesterday or the day before about a guy called, I think it's BBC, and they worked together, very, very young guys, and took his life completely un, unexpectedly last year during COVID. And the
Mm,
other guy's done a documentary about how, you know, that impacted on him, the kids, the lad's family and friends and other friends. And he actually goes on a kind of tour talking to young lads about suicide, about the friends that they've lost. Yeah, and what
yeah,
can be done. And one group of guys sitting in the house talking, and they've created this little code, and it's called 2OK. Because, you know, like, oh, Paul, how you doing? No, I'm okay. And then we
yeah.
kind of leave it at that. But what they do is, in the conversation, they'll ask that question twice: Are you okay? Because when you say it the first time, you kind of just, yeah, I'm all right. You brush it off.
Yeah, yeah,
But when you say it a second time, look, Paul, are you really all right? Are you really okay? Then that gives the opportunity for somebody who's struggling a little bit to go, well, actually, you know what I mean? I'm just split up with my
you know,
girlfriend, or this has happened, that's happened, you know.
but you know what? There's so many layers to this conversation, though, because um, you know, asking someone if they're okay, the person that's receiving that has to be has to have the capacity to hear that.
Mm.
And what can so frequently happen is that people go into fix mode. So you ask, "Are you okay?" And the person goes, "Actually, no, I'm not." And then the response is, "Oh, well, don't worry. Like, it'll all be, you'll get a job soon," or blah blah blah. And actually, the vulnerable bit and the healing bit is in the empathy, is in the
exactly.
that's tough, right? And I think that's really difficult. I don't think there's much space that we see actually where that's done well and where that's role modeled well. And then, when you look at how mental health is misunderstood, people talk about my depression and my anxiety as if it's this kind of tattoo that's been, embellished on them. And actually, again, it comes back to story. There is always context. There is, it's upbringing, it's environment, it's nutrition. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm not okay with the way that mental health gets talked about at the moment, because it's almost like this dead end of, "Oh, well, I suffer from this," as if it's a total medical condition. And it's not. We need to understand that there's good reason and there's good context that builds towards those symptoms that display as depression. And again, that comes back to feelings, right, Paul? I look at depression really as kind of like an internalized rage. And if that doesn't get, if the frustration, the resentment, the fear, the confusion doesn't get expressed somewhere further upstream, then it gets bottled up into this nub. And that's what I talk about with addiction as well. It's like this crystallized coping strategy of not being able to talk about and deal with or regulate. It's not deal with, regulate those emotions.
I've been through depression for a long time, and it is exactly that. It's a crystallization of all of those thoughts and feelings and emotions, particularly one of frustration. That's a really big one that you can't let out. You can't find an outlet for it. And so it kind of crushes you. And I completely understand why people take their lives when you get to that stage, because
and actually, I had a friend that killed herself when I lived out in Spain for a year. She had a history of trauma, but she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It was untreated. It was complex PTSD that she had. It was very complex trauma, and she was given 3 months worth of tablets, antidepressant tablets, and sent off to Spain. So I was with her. And I was with her. I was the last person to be with her, and I think this is why I'm so passionate about this. And I remember that night her saying to me, she had decided to come back to England, but she was worried about being a disappointment, and everyone thought that she could do this, and what was she going to do if she didn't do this? And that idea of no choice, that I can't show who I am because there's so much layered on me of expectations and messages and, other people's beliefs and things. And, and the next morning she took an overdose. And, I thought I was doing the right thing, but what I said the night before, which was, "Well, tomorrow it'll be sunny, then you'll be on a plane back to England. It's going to be okay." But when someone's in that state, that's, we're so ill equipped to be able to have that honest conversation. And that's why I go back to this idea of rehumanizing, one poem at a time, because we all feel despair and hope and confusion, frustration and love. And, I'm the worst person in the world. All of those, we all feel those. That's being human.
It's the human condition, isn't it? Yes. In a nutshell.
It is. It is.
Life is ups and downs, peaks and troughs, plateaus, good times, bad times, boring times, incredibly exciting times, all mixed into this one big pot of soup called being human.
Yeah. And we live in this society, thanks to advertising and all that sort of stuff, that kind of convinces us that it should be better than this. I think this is actually what I wrote in the book. I think if we actually all just accepted that being human is quite a miserable experience, we'd all probably be a bit happier.
That's a great note to end on, isn't it? Life is so miserable.
No, but what I mean about that is, I know, but like but it gets rid of the should. Oh, I'm finding this hard because it is hard. Not that's it. It's like, oh, I can like, the suffering's in the resistance. If I'm finding something tough, that's okay. And then I won't find it tough in a while. But if I'm resistant to, I shouldn't feel this way, it's more painful.
Actually, that's quite a stoic approach, isn't it?
Someone else used that. What do you mean by that? Someone else used that
It means
word.
about like accepting that life is hard and then just getting on with life.
Well, I think it's kind of like it is accepting that it's
building resilience, building personal inner resilience, so you can deal with the shit that comes along, the bad times, the difficult times, the challenges.
Like when you say it back to me, it does sound quite negative. I don't mean it like that. I don't mean, but it's that acceptance of their struggle.
Yeah, acceptance, like I said, that life is this bowl of soup of good, bad, difficult, challenging, scary, all the rest of it. And then just getting on with it rather than trying to avoid stuff. I don't want to face that because it could be, deal with it.
Yeah. But then also like look out for the glimmers and catch those and put them in a poem.
But that's part of it. Yeah, put it in a poem. You heard it here first, folks. Put it in a poem. That should be your catchphrase, shouldn't it? Put it in a poem.
Put it in a poem, yeah.
So, Jacky, where can people reach out to you if they want to sort of find out more about what you're doing in your workshops? Where do you do your workshops? And currently, I'm guessing they're online.
Currently they're on Zoom. Yeah, and I'll probably keep some of them on Zoom. It's worked really well. And I think people have got kind of impatient with commuting times and things, haven't they? It's like,
absolutely,
oh, God,
yeah.
I have to drive for 20 minutes to that. Won't bother. So.
All right. So where can people find out? Do you have a website?
So I have a website, www.jackypower.com, and that's Jacky with a Y, or www.therapeuticpoet.com. They both take you to the same place. And then you can just sign up for my newsletter. I think that's kind of the easiest, the easiest thing to do. I'm also on Instagram at Jacky L Power, and I pop up different poems and things on there on a weekly basis.
Okay, don't worry about trying to remember all of that. I will post those links in the show notes. Jacky, it's been a unique experience because it's gone, you've read poems and we've gone from like talking about you setting up a one-person show to the size of the universe and everything in between. So it's been great.
Tuesday morning.
So listen, it's been great meeting you. Thank you so much for your time and speak to you soon. Bye now.
Thank you. Pleasure. Take care.